Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the Tea Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. So we're in January, kicking along with our series entitled Be Ye Not Discouraged, as we talk about the challenges that we have with being able to set and reach our goals. So if you are a person that has problems being consistent, identifying clear goals, and being able to create long-standing change, then this episode is for you. Today we are discussing change, consistency, and clarity, setting and reaching goals. So this month I'm trying to ensure that I give you all a scripture, a word of encouragement, some meditation, tones, a few different things as you're working toward figuring out what works for you in terms of being able to make some of these changes you want to make. So your scripture for today is First Corinthians chapter 15, verse number 58. You all know I like the New International Version. Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. Your word of encouragement is courtesy of Dwayne Johnson, who says success isn't always about greatness, it's about consistency. Consistent hard work leads to success. Greatness will come. Guided meditation that you're looking at for this week should focus on consistency and inner strength. And you're also going to be listening to tones that increase awareness and clarity. So I was inspired to do this particular topic, of course, because in January is when we set usually these goals and we fall off by the time February hits for most people. But the Big Dog Talk podcast was talking about the reasons that people change. And it was an interesting perspective to me. So the facilitator said that people change because they're hurt enough that they have to, they see enough that they're inspired to, they learn enough that they want to, they receive enough that they're able to. And that led me to really think about why people have problems with change, one, but also what ends up happening with our consistency. So we'll start out, we'll create these goals, we'll try to set up these habits, and we'll go along for a while, and then we find ourselves falling off, maybe over time, some of us sooner than others, depending on what it is. We may be able to even keep it up for long periods of time. People have done this with stopping to smoke when they stopped smoking cigarettes, and they've been able to go years without smoking, and then one day they're back smoking again, and now they've been 20 years smoking again, right? So what happens with our ability to be consistent and actually create change? So a few different things come up. One is that sometimes we're so focused on the outcome that we lose sight of the process. And so we say, hey, I want to have this goal of that I quit smoking cigarettes, or that I lose weight, or I'm consistently journaling, or I'm putting money in my savings account. And so once you start doing that, then it feels like you've attained it, the goal, right? So, okay, now I've saved some money. I haven't been smoking. I've been smoke free for 6 months now. I've been exercising for a year now. And then it becomes no longer a goal, because essentially we feel like we've reached it. And so when you feel like you've reached something, sometimes you don't have the same motivation to continue, right? So you start to become stagnant in it, and it loses that appeal. One of the things we like about stuff when we first started is it's new. It's new and we're motivated, we're driven, we want to get it done. But then we reach what we perceive to be that pinnacle, and then we fall off, right? Sometimes we don't believe in ourselves. And that goes for not only us not having a sense of worth and that we deserve things and that we're capable of doing things, but also that we tend to focus on our failures. And we literally do not believe we're capable of being able to be consistent with something. So remember, we've talked a lot about whatever you believe is how you behave. So if I've set my thoughts up to reinforce for me that self-fulfilling prophecy we've talked about before, that I'm not going to achieve this, I don't believe it, so of course I'm not going to do it. And I'm going to prove myself right, because I won't. that complacency that I talked about, alluded to initially, when we are so focused on the outcome, we lose sight of the process. We also can get very complacent. And so I'm satisfied with where I am. And so I'm not driven as much, or I'm comfortable. Comfort is one of the things that, unfortunately, sometimes doesn't work very well with change. Is because we say, what, the devil I know is better than the devil I don't know. So I'm going to stay on over here and not push myself to do something that I don't know what's going to happen. We have that anticipatory anxiety of what the future holds sometimes for us. And so I don't want to take these steps because I don't know where I might end up. Sometimes we focus on quantity and not quality. I've seen people that we talked a little bit about this in our last podcast, that have all of these goals and all of these ideas, these dreams that they have, but they don't come to fruition because they have so many they're trying to do. People trying to run 4 and 5 businesses at one time when you haven't really fully gotten one off the ground yet. So it's not sustainable. We start things that we can't keep up. And so sometimes we've not been able to maintain the amount of time. It takes a lot of time when you're trying to invest in something new to get it set up. If you meal prepped, meal prepping takes some time. Now, once you get used to it, you can figure out some ways to help yourself with meal prep. But starting is what is very overwhelming for people. Like, oh, I got to go grocery shopping, which means I got to make a list. And then on this list, I got to ensure I have everything for the ingredients for these recipes. And then I get it, and I don't even know what that is. Where do they even have that? What aisle is that on? What is that? And so we struggle because we're trying to take on things we're not quite ready to do yet. We haven't done the actual prep. And so we're not going to be able to keep it up because we don't have accountability sometimes. We don't have the right support in place. We don't have enough knowledge. Whenever you're starting something new, you want to definitely do some research on it. Now, sometimes we can over-research, and we've talked about the overthinking, and then you can talk yourself out of it because it's like, oh, I won't be able to do that. But I do need to at least have a foundation and background in terms of what I would need to be able to start to be able to have a goal, much less be consistent on it. So that leads me to that next point of it wasn't clearly thought out. And oftentimes I'll talk with people, and what they believe to be true in their minds doesn't actually add up on paper. And so we frequently do this with financial endeavors, is that we think we actually have more money than we really do. And then when we start balancing those checkbooks and trying to manage those ledgers, we realize we've overextended ourselves. We can overextend ourselves financially, we can overextend ourselves socially. And so we often end up overcommitting and not being able to maintain that demand, whether that's to other people or even for ourselves. And then the other thing that I will say, and this I particularly thought about this with the Big Dog podcast, is that a lot of times we're doing behavior modification, but not actually sustained change. And that's what I thought about when I was listening to some of those reasons why we get hurt enough. Sometimes we get uncomfortable because someone has maybe given us a deadline. We've been told that if we're late one more time, we're going to get terminated from our employment. We've been told that if we don't address these issues that we've been exhibiting, these behaviors that we've been exhibiting in our relationship, that someone is going to end the relationship. And so we modify our behavior, but we're not actually really intending on changing. We're just trying to do a little bit to get out of the hot seat. And so our motivation isn't truly there to be different with regard to being able to be consistent with making those changes. And so we fall short. So, what are some of the strategies that we can engage in order to be more consistent, to have more clear goals, and to be able to create the type of change we want to have? One, you got to be clear about what you're actually working toward. And I will tell people there's a difference between an aspiration and a goal. Sometimes we have these aspirations. Don't get upset with me. But a lot of times I do not like that people focus on a vision board because they never get beyond the vision. And so what I'll tell people to do is come on off of that vision board and give me some clear, concrete goals that you're working toward. You have 30 things on that vision board. You won't be able to work on 30 things at one time. So what are the 1, 2, or maybe 3 things that you're going to work on, and what are going to be the steps? And that is where you start the creation of your actual plan. And it is important for us to know our why. And you'll hear me talk about why, because our purpose is important when we're trying to make changes, when we're trying to be consistent. Because as I told you, if your outcome is simply like, oh, okay, here's the goal and I'm not focused on the process, then once I reach something that's on my goal list, then it's easy for me to fall back into old patterns. So I need to think about why this needs to be a long-standing change, why this is something that I want to continue. What is it that I hope to continue to grow in? And sometimes that means you'll create a plan and then you'll have to alter that plan to create a new outcome that you're working toward. It's very important that we have small, realistic goals. You want to gradually get to your desired outcome. And this is where behavior modification actually was intended to work. So you make these small changes until you get to this bigger change, and then you work toward reinforcing and maintaining that change. But what happens is people will start making small changes and then they'll fall off and they never actually get to the big change part of it and being able to maintain. And so an example of a realistic small goal would be, so say for instance, you are trying to make some changes in what you're intaking into your body. One small change might be, I want to add more water. So right now I'm only getting about a bottle in a day, 16 ounces. So maybe I work toward, okay, well, let me try to get 20 ounces. Let me try to get 24 ounces. Let me work up to 32 ounces. That would be an example of a small, realistic goal to get you toward that larger goal and this hopefully sustained change of you being able to add water in a more consistent way in your life. But that means I need to have a water app. I may need to have one of those jugs that tells you by what time of day you need to have drink a certain amount of water. I need to have water available. Some of us like water cold, ice cold. Some of us like it room temperature. Sometimes we like to drink out of a straw. Sometimes we like to drink out of a cup. And so figuring those things out for you are your steps. How am I going to get there? And then how am I going to measure them? Am I going to track how much I'm drinking water in an app on my phone? Am I going to track it in a log, paper and pencil? I know some people like paper and pencil. Am I going to be reporting back to a group and letting them know, hey, this is my goal and I need you all to hold me accountable? And then it's important, again, for us to be able to revise and reevaluate. So if that's not working, maybe I tried the water app and the water app isn't working for me. So instead of me trying to force the water app, let me find some other things that might be helpful. And so one of the things that sometimes helps is when you get physical activity, you tend to be more thirsty. So if I add some physical activity in there, that might actually allow me to be able to drink more water. Anticipate that you are going to hit a block, a lull. There's going to be some interference. You're going to have a desire to return to old patterns because they're comfortable, they're familiar, and we often don't prepare for that. And so when it happens, we just kind of fall apart, and there goes that goal. And then it might take us a while to even get back on track. If you've ever tried to start eating healthy or working out, you know that there can be several kind of moments within that journey where you slide back into old patterns, because we know there are physiological, emotional, social, physical connections to all kinds of things that we do. So it isn't just about mind over matter, and I know we say that frequently. The mind is very powerful. I also need to be aware that there are some things that I might be physiologically addicted to, or that socially are in my environment that are interfering with me being able to change. So I need to create a plan for how I'm going to address those things, which means I might have to remove some people out. There's maybe some people that I don't go to for support because they're still dealing with habits that I'm trying to break. There are people that don't support my goals. There are people that aren't clear and will have me feeling more frazzled and confused. And so I want to be very mindful about who I'm inviting into this process of change with me. It is important that you show up for yourself and you're present. Sometimes we're just going through the motions, which doesn't allow us to actually be able to understand our why because we're not invested, we're not anchored. So sometimes it can be really helpful to, I started with a scripture, it's words of encouragement. It's good for us to figure out what we're going to do for our mental wellness when we're trying to work toward goals and consistency and clarity. Some people do start with prayer. Some people do start their day with meditation. People start with podcasts. So figuring out what are going to be those things that get you going instead of starting your day on social media or starting your day with emails or phone calls or texts, it may be helpful that you center yourself when you start your day so that you can remain focused on those goals and they don't end up falling into that sea of forgetfulness. You are going to have moments where you don't feel like doing it. You don't feel like it, you're not excited about it. And so expecting that you're going to be inspired every day is not realistic. But you are going to need to push through those moments. And that's when that prayer and meditation and getting up and going, just taking that step, as we've talked about so many times, is going to be really important. I also don't think that people really fully understand the benefits of the basics. So when you're trying to create new goals or you're creating change or you're working toward building something, when I talk about that research, you need to learn the foundation for whatever it is you're trying to do. If you're trying to make changes in your physical activity, learn about how your body is affected by particular exercises. Learn how food affects your body. Learn how sleep affects your body. If you're trying to create a goal for a business, do the research on the financial aspect of the business, as well as maintaining a business, the personnel issues, HR things I want to get in place, marketing, branding, all of these things are important. So finding those fundamentals will give you a place of an anchor to go back to if you feel like you're floundering and you're kind of flapping in the wind. Forgive yourself, right? If you're holding on to some things, some hurts that are causing you not to have worth, not to see yourself as valuable, not to feel like you deserve it, then address those things. It may be affirmations, it may be therapy. You knew I was going to get that plug in. You may need to find some inspirational words or stories of people who have experienced similar things and been able to work through it. But it's important that you continue to find joy in whatever it is you're working toward. Because if you hate it and you dread it and you despise it, you're not going to be really very likely to want to continue it. Okay? So whatever it is that you're working on in this season, create your plan so that you can be clear about what it is you're working toward and that you have the things set up that are going to allow you to be able to be consistent so you can fully implement change and not just behavior modification. Be well.